The clink of ceramic mugs and the soft murmur of morning conversations filled the small cafe where I'd worked for the past 8 months. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching dust particles that danced in the golden beams. I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, feeling it escape from my messy bun as I balanced 3 plates on my forearm, a skill I'd perfected through necessity rather than choice. "Order up for table 7, Ellie," Marco called from the kitchen, sliding a tray with a single espresso across the counter. I nodded, keeping my eyes down as I collected it. Table 7. The corner booth. His booth. He'd started coming in 3 weeks ago. Always alone, despite the 2 men who waited outside in the sleek black Bentley. Always the same order. A single espresso, no sugar. Always the same time. 7:15 a.m., precise as clockwork. Nobody knew his name, but everybody knew of him. The way the room tensed when he entered. The way other patrons averted their eyes. The way Marco, usually loud and boisterous, lowered his voice to a respectful murmur when taking his order. I'd heard the whispers. "A businessman," they said. But businesses don't typically require armed guards or instill that particular brand of fear that makes the air feel electric. I steadied my breathing as I approached his table, the fine china cup rattling slightly against the saucer in my trembling hands. "Don't spill. Don't spill. Don't—" "Thank you," he said as I set down his espresso, his voice a low rumble that somehow cut through all other sounds in the cafe. I made the mistake of looking up. Dark eyes, almost black, met mine. They didn't match the polite words. Cold, assessing, like he was cataloging every detail of my face and finding me unremarkable. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. A crisp white shirt with silver cufflinks catching the light. His black hair was cut short at the sides, longer on top, a hint of silver at the temples that added distinction rather than age. A heavy signet ring adorned his right hand, gold with some kind of crest I couldn't make out. "You're new," he stated, though I'd served him every day for weeks. I've been here for a while, sir," I replied, hating the stammer that always betrayed my nerves. A dismissal. I was invisible again. I retreated quickly, bumping into an empty chair and nearly losing my balance. My face burned with embarrassment as I heard a soft chuckle from his direction. Great. Now I was entertainment. The morning rush kept me busy, refilling coffees, clearing tables, taking orders. I barely noticed when he left, only registering the folded bills beneath his cup. Always too much, a tip that exceeded the cost of his espresso several times over. I never understood why. Perhaps the excess was as meaningless to him as I was. I was wiping down tables during the mid-morning lull when my sleeve rode up, exposing the small tattoo on the inside of my wrist. A delicate constellation of stars forming Cassiopeia. I'd gotten it 2 years ago, a reminder of nights spent with my father on our apartment rooftop, learning the stars through his old telescope before the cancer took him. Before everything fell apart, the bell above the door jingled, and instinctively I tugged my sleeve down. The cafe was mostly empty now, just a couple in the window seat, and an elderly man with his newspaper. I turned, customer service smile ready, and froze. He had returned. The man from table 7. This time he wasn't alone. One of his guards flanked him, bulky in a dark suit that barely contained his shoulders, eyes hidden behind sunglasses despite being indoors. But it wasn't the guard that made my heart stutter in my chest. It was the intensity in the man's gaze as it locked onto me. "You," he said, and the single word carried the weight of a command. Marco appeared beside me, wiping his hands on his apron. "Sir, how can we help you? Your usual table. I need to speak with her." His eyes never left mine, and I felt pinned in place like a butterfly on display. "I'm working," I managed, voice barely above a whisper. "Take a break," he replied. Not a suggestion, but an order. Marco looked between us, confusion and concern warring on his face. "Ellie, you can use the back office if you need to talk." Traitor, I thought, but nodded stiffly. What choice did I have? I led the way to the small office, heart hammering in my chest, palms damp with sweat. The room was barely large enough for a desk and 2 chairs, stacks of invoices and schedules covering every surface. I heard the door close behind me and turned to find him standing too close. his presence filling the tiny space and making it hard to breathe. "Your wrist," he said. I blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" "Show me your wrist." Instinctively, I clutched my left arm to my chest. Protective. "Why?" Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Please." The word was polite, but the tone left no room for refusal. Slowly I extended my arm and pulled back my sleeve, revealing the constellation. His sharp intake of breath was audible in the quiet room. Long fingers reached out, hesitated, then gently turned my wrist to see the tattoo more clearly. His touch was unexpectedly warm against my skin. "Cassiopeia," he said, voice rough with an emotion I couldn't identify. "Yes." I swallowed hard. "How did you—" "What's your name?" He interrupted. "Your full name." "Eleanor Wright," I answered, unable to look away from his face, from the strange intensity that had replaced the cold indifference of earlier. "Eleanor," he repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "I'm Antonio Russo." He offered the information like it should mean something to me. Maybe it should have. The name carried weight, authority. "Why are you interested in my tattoo, Mr. Russo?" I found courage from somewhere, perhaps the absurdity of the situation giving me temporary boldness. His jaw tightened. My wife had the same one, exactly the same, in the same place. The past tense didn't escape my notice. "Had?" "She died, 5 years ago. I'm sorry," I said automatically, then frowned. "But it's just a constellation. Many people must have similar tattoos." "Not like this. Not Cassiopeia, with this particular arrangement of stars." His thumb brushed over my skin, tracing the pattern. "She designed it herself." I pulled my hand away, unease crawling up my spine. "That's impossible. I designed this. It's based on how the constellation looked the night my father died." Antonio stepped back, eyes narrowing as he studied my face with new interest. "How old are you, Eleanor?" 25, I answered, increasingly bewildered by this strange interrogation. Something shifted in his expression. Calculation, suspicion, I couldn't tell. "Where are you from originally?" "Chicago, but I don't see how." "And your parents?" "Both dead," I said flatly. "Look, I need to get back to work. Whatever you think, take the rest of the day off," he said. "I'd like to continue this conversation somewhere more private." A chill ran through me. "No, thank you. I need this job. Your job will be waiting for you tomorrow." The certainty in his voice suggested he could guarantee it. "My car is outside. I'm not going anywhere with you." I reached for the door handle. "I don't know you." His hand shot out, not to grab me, but to press against the door, keeping it closed. He wasn't touching me, but the barrier of his arm made me acutely aware of how much larger he was, how much stronger. "Please," he said, and this time the words sounded genuine. "I just want to talk. About the tattoo. About some other coincidences that I find concerning." "Concerning how?" My voice had dropped to a whisper. 5 years ago, my wife was killed in what was supposed to look like an accident. Her body was never recovered. His eyes held mine, searching. "She was pregnant at the time." My breath caught. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything yet, but I need to know more about you, Eleanor Wright. About your past. Your real past." "This is crazy." I shook my head. "I have memories, a childhood. I can't be—" "Connected to my wife?" he finished. "Perhaps not, but I need to be certain." The weight of his gaze was unbearable. I looked away, mind racing. This couldn't be real. This man, this stranger, thought I might somehow be linked to his dead wife because of a tattoo. It was absurd, dangerous. Yet something tugged at the edges of my consciousness, a vague sense of unease I'd carried my whole life, the gaps in my childhood memories, the nightmares of water and darkness, the unexplained fear of cars driving too close behind me. 1 hour, I found myself saying, in public, and then I come back to work. Relief flickered across his face, quickly masked. Acceptable. There's a restaurant across the street. I nodded, still not entirely sure why I was agreeing to this madness. I need to tell Marco. It's been taken care of. Of course it had. As we left the cafe, I felt the weight of eyes on me. Marco's concern, the curiosity of the other waitress, and most pressingly, the calculating assessment of Antonio's guard who now flanked us as we crossed the street. The restaurant was upscale, probably the kind that required reservations weeks in advance. Yet we were immediately shown to a private booth in the back. No one asked for Antonio's name. They already knew who he was. I sat stiffly across from him, the guard positioned nearby but out of earshot. A waiter appeared with water and disappeared just as quickly. "Who are you?" I asked, the question encompassing more than just his name. Antonio leaned forward slightly. "I think the more important question right now is who are you, Eleanor, and whether you truly know the answer." His words sent an inexplicable shiver down my spine, as if he'd voiced a question I'd been afraid to ask myself for years. "Tell me about your childhood," he continued, voice deceptively gentle. "Your earliest memory." I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it again. My earliest clear memory was from when I was nearly 8 years old. A school play, the scratchy costume, the bright lights, everything before that came in disjointed fragments, like photographs of someone else's life. "That's none of your business," I said instead, suddenly protective of those fragmented memories. "It might be more my business than you realize." His fingers drummed once on the tablecloth, then stilled. "Were you adopted, Eleanor?" The question hit like a physical blow. "No. At least, my parents never said. But they could have lied, couldn't they?" The thought had occurred to me before, in quiet moments when I'd studied my reflection and seen nothing of either parent looking back at me. "What was your mother's name?" he asked. "Grace," I answered automatically. "Grace Wright." "And what did she look like?" I started to answer, then faltered. I could remember her voice, her laugh, the smell of her perfume. But her face? It was blurred, indistinct, like a photograph left too long in the sun. Antonio watched the confusion play across my features, his expression darkening. "Someone has gone to great lengths to hide you, Eleanor. The question is why?" The restaurant around us faded to background noise as Antonio's words sank in. "Hide me? From what? From whom?" My hands trembled as I reached for the water glass, nearly knocking it over. "You're scaring me," I admitted, hating the vulnerability in my voice. "Good," Antonio replied, not unkindly. "You should be scared. Fear keeps us alert, keeps us alive." He signaled to a waiter who appeared instantly. "Bring us coffee. An espresso for me and—" He looked at me questioningly. "Just water is fine," I said, but he shook his head slightly. "A latte for the lady, with an extra shot." The waiter nodded and disappeared. Antonio's eyes never left my face, studying me with that same unsettling intensity. "Tell me about the accident," I said, needing to break the silence. "The one with your wife." Something flashed in his eyes, pain, quickly masked by anger. "It wasn't an accident. It was made to look like one." His voice dropped lower. "A car ran her off the road near Lake Michigan. The vehicle went into the water. By the time my men arrived, there was nothing left but some debris floating on the surface." I shivered despite the warmth of the restaurant. "I'm sorry." "Her name was Sophia," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "We had been married for 3 years. She was 5 months pregnant with our first child." His hand clenched into a fist on the table. "A daughter." The waiter returned with our coffee, moving silently and efficiently before retreating again. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, needing something to ground me. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, though a terrible suspicion was beginning to form in the back of my mind. "Because you have her tattoo, because you're the right age, because you have no clear memories before age 8. He leaned forward. "And because you have her eyes." I shook my head. "That's impossible. You're talking about a child who would have died before birth." "Am I?" His gaze was piercing. "No body was ever recovered, Eleanor. Not Sophia's, not the baby's." "So you think what? That your wife survived, gave birth to me, and then—" "What?" The scenario was too absurd to even complete. "I think someone wanted to hurt me by taking what mattered most." His voice was cold now, controlled in a way that was more frightening than anger would have been, and I think they may have succeeded beyond what I ever imagined possible. Why would anyone do that? In my line of work, You make enemies. And what work is that exactly? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. The corner of his mouth twitched upward, not quite a smile. Let's just say I have interests in various businesses across the city. Some legitimate, some less so. A chill ran through me. The rumors about him were true then. So you're what? A mobster? A mafia boss? Those are such theatrical terms, he replied, taking a sip of his espresso. I prefer to think of myself as a businessman operating outside conventional regulations. A criminal, I translated flatly, if you like. He set down his cup with deliberate care. But that's not what matters right now. What matters is discovering the truth about who you are. I know who I am, I insisted, but the words felt hollow, uncertain. Do you? Tell me about your parents, these people who raised you. What did your father do for a living? He was a professor, I said, grasping for details. Astronomy. That's why the constellation means so much to me. And your mother? She worked at a library. They met there when he was researching for a book. Antonio nodded, watching me carefully. Where did you grow up? Chicago. I told you that. Where in Chicago? I opened my mouth to answer, then froze. I could remember our apartment, the creaky third step, the view of the street below. But the name of the neighborhood, the address, it was blank, like so many other details of my early life. I don't remember exactly, I admitted, anxiety clawing at my chest. We moved around a lot. Convenient, he murmured. And your parents? They're both deceased, you said. How did they die? My father had cancer. He died when I was 15. That memory was clear, painfully so. The hospital smell, the hollows beneath his eyes, his hand growing cold in mine. My mother, there was a car accident 3 years ago. Antonio's expression sharpened. A car accident? Like the one that supposedly killed my wife? That's just a coincidence, I said, but doubt crept into my voice. I don't believe in coincidences, Eleanor. Not in my world. He reached into his jacket and produced a small photograph, sliding it across the table. This was Sophia. With trembling fingers, I picked up the photo. A beautiful woman with dark hair smiled back at me, her hand resting protectively over a slightly rounded stomach. She stood on a terrace overlooking a garden, the sunlight catching the gleam of a delicate gold necklace around her throat. And on her wrist, clearly visible, a constellation of stars, Cassiopeia, identical to mine. But what made my breath catch wasn't the tattoo. It was her eyes, dark brown with a distinctive ring of amber around the pupil, exactly like the eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. This doesn't prove anything, I whispered, unable to look away from the photograph. It's just a strange resemblance. There are tests we could do, Antonio said quietly, DNA tests that would tell us conclusively. I placed the photograph back on the table, pushing it toward him. And if they're negative? If this is all just some bizarre coincidence? Then I'll apologize for disturbing you, compensate you for your time, and we'll never speak again. His tone was matter of fact, but something in his eyes told me he was already convinced. And if they're positive, if by some impossible scenario I am somehow related to your wife, Antonio's expression hardened, then someone has committed a crime against my family, against you, and they will answer for it. The quiet menace in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't a man who made idle threats. I need to think, I said, feeling overwhelmed. This is all too much. Of course. He reached into his pocket and placed a business card on the table. My private number. Call me when you're ready to talk again. I stared at the card but didn't take it. What if I don't call? What if I just want to forget this conversation ever happened? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. That wouldn't be wise, Eleanor. Not for your safety. Are you threatening me? I asked, anger finally breaking through my confusion. I'm trying to protect you, he countered. If I've figured out who you might be, others could too. Others who might wish to use you against me. I don't want any part of whatever this is. I gestured vaguely between us. Your world, your enemies. You may not have a choice. He picked up the card and took my hand. pressing the card into my palm and closing my fingers around it. His touch lingered, warm, and somehow both gentle and commanding. Some things are determined by fate, not choice. I pulled my hand away, tucking the card into my pocket. I don't believe in fate. Neither did I, he said with a grim smile, until I saw that tattoo on your wrist. As if summoned by his words, one of his guards appeared at our table, leaning down to murmur something in Antonio's ear. His expression darkened instantly. "We need to go," he said, standing abruptly. "Now." "What's wrong?" I asked, alarmed by the sudden change. "One of my associates has spotted a car circling the block. The same car has passed by 3 times in the last 15 minutes. His eyes were cold, calculating. It could be nothing. Or it could be someone watching us. Fear shot through me. Watching us? Why? I told you. In my position, you develop enemies. He gestured to his guard. Victor will take you back to your apartment. Don't go to work tomorrow. Stay home until I contact you. No, I said firmly, standing up. I'm going back to the cafe to finish my shift. I need the money, and I'm not going to hide because of some paranoid. This isn't a negotiation, Antonio cut me off, voice low and dangerous. If there's even a chance you're connected to Sophia, I'm not taking risks with your safety. You can't control my life based on a theory, I argued. I don't even know you. Something softened briefly in his expression. You may know me better than you realize, Eleanor. He nodded to Victor. Take her home. Ensure she arrives safely. Then keep watch on the apartment until I send a replacement. Before I could protest further, Antonio had moved toward the exit, another guard materializing to flank him. Victor looked at me expectantly, his expression impassive behind dark sunglasses. I can find my own way home, I said stubbornly. Mr. Russo's instructions were clear, Victor replied, his voice surprisingly gentle for such an imposing man. Please don't make this difficult. Exhaustion suddenly washed over me. This day had veered so far from normal that I no longer had the energy to fight. Fine, but I need to tell Marco I won't be finishing my shift. Victor nodded. We can stop at the cafe on the way. The drive to my apartment was silent and tense. Victor sat in the back with me while another man drove, both of them scanning the streets with practiced vigilance. I stared out the window, mind racing. None of this made sense. The tattoo, the resemblance to Antonio's wife, the gaps in my memory. It was like pieces from different puzzles, none of them fitting together properly. My apartment building looked shabbier than usual as we pulled up in front of it. The peeling paint and cracked steps, a stark contrast to the luxury of the sleek black car. Victor insisted on walking me to my door, checking each room of my tiny one-bedroom apartment before pronouncing it secure. I'll be outside, he said, heading toward the door. All night? I asked incredulously. Until the replacement arrives in the morning. This is insane, I muttered. I'm not who he thinks I am. Victor paused, studying me for a moment. Mr. Russo doesn't make mistakes about important things. He hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, you do look like her. Like Sophia. Then he was gone, pulling the door shut behind him. I locked it automatically, then sank onto my worn sofa, head in my hands. The business card felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. I pulled it out, staring at the embossed name and number. Antonio Russo, a name that apparently meant something in certain circles. A dangerous name. Could he be right? Could my entire life be some elaborate lie? I tried to focus on my childhood memories, but they remained frustratingly vague and disjointed. I couldn't even recall my mother's face clearly, yet I could remember the precise pattern of cracks on my bedroom ceiling. If I wasn't Eleanor Wright, who was I? The thought sent me to my small desk, pulling open the drawer where I kept important documents. My birth certificate, social security card, high school diploma, all the paper proof of my identity. The birth certificate looked official enough, listing Grace and Thomas Wright as my parents, Chicago Memorial Hospital as my birthplace, but documents could be forged, lives could be fabricated. I moved to the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Dark eyes with amber rings around the pupils stared back at me. Sophia's eyes. I tugged my sleeve up, looking at the constellation tattoo on my wrist. Her tattoo. This is crazy. I whispered to my reflection, completely insane. Yet something about Antonio's certainty had shaken me deeply. The gaps in my memory suddenly seemed more sinister than simply forgetting. The nightmares of water and darkness took on new meaning. I returned to the living room and picked up my phone, finger hovering over the screen. I should call someone, talk through this madness with a voice of reason. But who? I had acquaintances, co-workers, but no close friends I could burden with something this bizarre. A sharp knock at my door made me jump, heart racing. Had Antonio returned? Or was it someone else? Someone connected to the car that had been circling the restaurant. "Who is it?" I called, voice shaking slightly. "Ms. Right? It's Detective Mills, Chicago PD. I need to speak with you about Antonio Russo." My heart hammered in my chest. The police? Already? I approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. A man in a dark suit stood in the hallway, badge held up to the peephole. Detective Mills, apparently. Where was Victor? Wasn't he supposed to be guarding my door? "One moment," I called, trying to sound calmer than I felt. I fumbled with the chain lock, my fingers clumsy with sudden anxiety. As I reached for the doorknob, a text message pinged on my phone. Unknown number. "Don't open the door. No detective was sent. Stay inside." Antonio? It had to be. How did he have my number? I hesitated, hand still on the doorknob. "Ms. Wright, is everything okay in there?" The detective's voice had an edge of impatience now. Another knock. Harder this time. "Police. Open up." My phone pinged again. "If you open that door, you're dead. He's not a cop." A chill ran down my spine. I stepped back from the door. "I'm calling to verify your identity," I said, voice wavering. "What precinct are you from?" A moment of silence. Then, "Listen, lady, I don't have time for this. Open the door now or I'll have cause to bring you in for obstruction." Wrong answer. A real detective would have identified his precinct. I backed away from the door, just as a loud thud shook it in its frame. He was trying to break in. Panic surged through me. I ran to the kitchen, grabbing my phone on the way, and fumbled for a knife from the drawer. Another crash against the door. The wood splintered around the lock. My phone pinged again. Bedroom window. Fire escape. Now. I didn't stop to think. Clutching the knife and my phone, I sprinted to the bedroom, yanked open the window, and climbed onto the fire escape just as I heard the front door give way with a sickening crack. Heavy footsteps stormed through my apartment. "Where are you, bitch?" Not even pretending to be a cop anymore. The metal of the fire escape was cold under my bare feet. I hadn't even thought to grab shoes. I clambered down as quietly as I could, the rusty steps creaking beneath my weight. 2 flights down, 1 more to go. A face appeared at my bedroom window above. There she is. I abandoned stealth for speed, practically sliding down the last flight. As my feet hit the alley pavement, a black SUV screeched to a halt at the entrance. The passenger door flew open. Antonio leaned across the seat. "Get in! Now!" I hesitated for a split second, knife still clutched in my hand. The man from my apartment was now on the fire escape, descending rapidly. Antonio or the fake detective? The devil I barely knew, or the one I didn't know at all? I chose Antonio, diving into the SUV just as a gunshot cracked through the air. The bullet pinged off the vehicle's frame as Antonio pulled me fully inside, and the driver floored the accelerator. "Are you hurt?" Antonio's hands were on my shoulders, his eyes scanning me for injuries. I shook my head, too breathless to speak, adrenaline making my entire body shake. The knife slipped from my grip, clattering to the floor of the SUV. "What about Victor?" I gasped, suddenly remembering his promise to guard my door. Antonio's expression darkened. "We found him unconscious in the stairwell. He'll live, but he's got a nasty concussion." "Who was that man? What did he want?" My voice rose with panic. "Breathe, Eleanor," Antonio commanded, his hands moving from my shoulders to frame my face, forcing me to look at him. "Deep breaths. You're safe now." I tried to follow his instruction, drawing air into my lungs. His hands were warm against my skin, steadying. "That man works for Dmitry Volkov." Antonio said once my breathing had evened out. An old associate with whom I have unfinished business. Why would he come after me? I pulled away from Antonio's touch, wrapping my arms around myself. Because Volkov must know what I suspect. Who you might be. Antonio's jaw tightened. This changes everything. You can't go back to your apartment. It's not safe. The SUV turned sharply onto a main road, merging with late afternoon traffic. The driver, another of Antonio's security men I presumed, kept checking the mirrors. Are we being followed? I asked. Possibly, Antonio replied. But this vehicle is armored, and Ivan is one of my best drivers. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching the city blur past. My entire life had imploded in the span of a few hours, my apartment violated, my safety threatened, my identity in question. Where are we going? I asked, suddenly aware I was essentially being kidnapped, albeit from another kidnapper, somewhere safe, one of my properties outside the city. I don't have any of my things. No clothes, no toothbrush. Everything will be provided, he cut me off. Your safety is the priority right now. I turned to face him. I need answers, Antonio, real ones. No more cryptic hints or vague theories. What exactly do you think happened to me? To Sophia? Something like respect flickered in his eyes at my directness. Fair enough. He leaned back in his seat. 5 years ago, Sophia was supposedly killed by Volkov's men. Her car went into the lake. No bodies were recovered, but the damage to the guardrail and debris in the water made it clear what had happened. His voice remained steady, but I could see the cost of this recitation in the tightness around his eyes, the whiteness of his knuckles as his hands clenched. I turned the city upside down looking for her, for answers. I thought Volkov had ordered the hit as retaliation for a business deal gone wrong. A muscle jumped in Antonio's jaw. What I didn't know then was that Sophia had been reaching out to someone in the weeks before her death, making plans. She'd withdrawn cash from accounts I didn't know she had access to. You think she was planning to leave you? I asked softly. His eyes snapped to mine, anger flashing briefly before he controlled it. No. I think she was trying to protect our child. She'd had miscarriages before, and this pregnancy was further along than any previous one. She'd become protective. Secretive. So what are you suggesting happened? I believe Sophia faked her death, possibly with help from someone inside my organization. She disappeared to protect our unborn child from the dangers of my world. His gaze intensified. A child who would be about your age now. I shook my head. That's impossible. I have memories of growing up with my parents. Do you? He challenged. Or do you have fragments that you've stitched together into what seems like a coherent past? His words hit uncomfortably close to my earlier thoughts. But why would Sophia give up her child? Why wouldn't she keep me? If I am her daughter. Pain crossed Antonio's features. That's what I intend to find out. If someone took you from her, placed you with a surrogate family. The implications were too terrible to contemplate. And now Volkov is after me? Why? After all this time? Information is currency in our world, Antonio said grimly. If Volkov learned of your existence, of your potential connection to me, he'd see an opportunity, a way to finally destroy me completely. The SUV had left the city behind, now traveling along a highway bordered by increasingly rural landscapes. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Under different circumstances, it might have been beautiful. How did you know? I asked, watching his profile against the sunset. About the man at my door? I have people watching your building. When they reported a man claiming to be police with no patrol car in sight, I knew something was wrong. He glanced at me. I shouldn't have left you there with just Victor. It was a miscalculation. You couldn't have known. I should have. In my position, I can't afford to make mistakes. His voice hardened. Especially not with you. The possessive edge in his tone sent a shiver down my spine, not entirely from fear. There was something about Antonio Russo that affected me on a level I didn't understand. A pull. A connection that seemed to transcend our brief acquaintance. If his theory was correct, was it some kind of biological recognition? Daughter to father? The thought was too strange to contemplate. We drove for another hour in relative silence. I watched the landscape change from urban to suburban to rural, trying to process everything that had happened. Occasionally, Antonio would speak quietly to someone on his phone, rapid Italian that I couldn't understand. Finally, the SUV turned down a long, wooded driveway. Security gates opened automatically as we approached, closing behind us. Trees lined the driveway, obscuring whatever lay ahead, until we rounded a final curve and the house came into view. House wasn't the right word. It was an estate, a sprawling stone mansion set on manicured grounds, with a circular fountain in front and soft landscape lighting illuminating the approach. "Welcome to my home," Antonio said, as the SUV pulled to a stop at the front entrance. "You'll be safe here." The enormity of my situation hit me anew. I was miles from the city, from anything familiar, alone with a man who might be my father, or might be a dangerous criminal mastermind, or both. "How long do you expect me to stay here?" I asked, not moving to exit the vehicle. "Until I'm certain the threat has passed. Until we have answers." He studied my face. "I understand this is difficult, Eleanor. But it's necessary. I have a life, a job." "All of which can be put on hold," he interrupted. "Or permanently altered, if necessary." The casual way he spoke of rearranging my existence was chilling. "You can't just decide that for me." "I can if it means keeping you alive." He opened his door and came around to my side, offering his hand. "Come inside. You need rest and food. We can discuss the details tomorrow." Reluctantly, I placed my hand in his and allowed him to help me from the vehicle. His grip was warm and secure, steadying my still shaky legs. As we approached the front door, it swung open to reveal an older woman, with silver-streaked dark hair, dressed in a simple black dress. "Antonio," she greeted him warmly in a thick Italian accent. "Everything is prepared as you asked." "Grazie, Maria." He guided me forward with a hand at the small of my back. "This is Eleanor. She'll be staying with us for a while. Please show her to the blue guest suite and make sure she has everything she needs." Maria's eyes widened slightly as she looked at me, something like recognition flashing across her features before she schooled her expression. "Of course. This way, please, Miss Eleanor." I hesitated, looking back at Antonio. "What happens now?" "Now you rest," he said firmly. "Tomorrow, we'll begin looking for answers. And if my suspicions are correct," he trailed off, something fierce and protective darkening his gaze. "If you are who I think you are, then everything changes. For both of us." Maria led me through the mansion's grand foyer, up a sweeping staircase, and down a hallway lined with artwork that probably cost more than I'd earn in several lifetimes. The blue suite turned out to be larger than my entire apartment, with a 4-poster bed, sitting area, and a bathroom that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. "There are clothes in the wardrobe that should fit you," Maria said, opening a large closet to reveal garments still with tags attached. "Mr. Russo had them brought in this afternoon." "He was that certain I'd end up here?" I asked, a chill running through me at the level of preparation. Maria's expression softened. "Mr. Russo is a man who likes to be prepared for all possibilities." She hesitated, then added, "You look very much like her, you know, like Sophia?" Maria nodded, a sadness crossing her features. "I was her housekeeper for many years. She was a kind woman. Too gentle for the world she married into, perhaps. Did you know she was pregnant before she died?" "Yes. She was so happy about the baby." Maria's eyes grew distant with memory. "A little girl, she was certain, though it was too early to know for sure." "What happened to her, Maria? Really?" The housekeeper's expression closed off. "That is not for me to say. If Mr. Russo wishes to tell you, he will." She moved toward the door. "Rest now. I will bring you something to eat shortly." Left alone, I explored the suite, running my fingers over expensive fabrics and cool marble surfaces. The unreality of the situation washed over me in waves. 24 hours ago, I had been a waitress with a mundane life and ordinary problems. Now I was essentially a prisoner in a mansion, possibly the long-lost daughter of a Mafia boss, with people trying to kill me. I moved to the large window overlooking the estate's grounds. Security lights illuminated the perimeter, and I could make out the shapes of men patrolling the property. No way out. Not tonight, at least. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened glass. Dark eyes with rings of amber. Sophia's eyes. I touched the constellation tattoo on my wrist, tracing the familiar pattern of stars. Had I chosen this design by coincidence? Or was it some buried memory, surfacing from a past I couldn't consciously recall? The thought was both terrifying and strangely comforting. If Antonio was right, if I was Sophia's daughter, his daughter, then I wasn't alone in the world after all. But that would mean everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie. Block 4. I slept fitfully that night, dreams filled with water and darkness, a woman's voice calling my name, not Eleanor, but something else, something I couldn't quite hear. I woke, gasping, sheets tangled around me, the unfamiliar room disorienting in the pre-dawn light. For a moment, I thought I was back in my apartment. Then reality crashed back, the confrontation at the cafe, the man at my door, Antonio's revelations. I was in his mansion, under his protection, or his control. A soft knock at the door made me sit up. Yes? Maria entered, carrying a tray with coffee, and what smelled like freshly baked pastries. Good morning, Miss Eleanor. I thought you might like breakfast. My stomach growled in response. I hadn't eaten since that coffee with Antonio yesterday. Thank you, Maria. I pushed myself up against the headboard as she set the tray across my lap. What time is it? Just after 6. Mr. Russo asked if you would join him in his study at 8. She moved to the curtains, drawing them open to reveal a misty morning view of manicured gardens. The bathroom is stocked with everything you should need. If you require anything else, please use the house phone by the bed to call me. She left quietly, closing the door behind her. I sipped the coffee, perfectly prepared with just the right amount of cream, and nibbled at a flaky pastry filled with some kind of sweet cheese. Despite the circumstances, I had to admit the luxurious surroundings were a far cry from my usual rushed breakfast, standing at my kitchen counter. After showering in the marble bathroom, which had more jets and settings than I knew what to do with, I faced the wardrobe of brand new clothes. Everything was my size, eerily so, and far more expensive than anything I'd ever owned. I selected the simplest outfit I could find: dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, and comfortable leather flats. As I dressed, I caught sight of my reflection. With my damp hair and these clothes, I looked like I belonged in this world of wealth and luxury. The thought was unsettling. At precisely 8 o'clock, Maria appeared to escort me downstairs. The mansion was even more impressive by daylight. Soaring ceilings, artwork that belonged in museums, furniture that looked antique and priceless. She led me to a set of double doors and knocked softly. Antonio's voice called for us to enter. His study was a masculine space of dark woods, leather-bound books, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the back gardens. Antonio stood as we entered, setting down the document he'd been reading. Eleanor, I trust you slept well. His tone was formal, but his eyes searched my face with that now familiar intensity. As well as could be expected, I replied honestly. He nodded to Maria, who quietly withdrew, closing the doors behind her. Please, sit. He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. I sat, noting the steaming cup of coffee already waiting for me. Black, no sugar, not how I took it. Sophia's preference, perhaps? I've taken the liberty of having a doctor come to the house this morning, Antonio said without preamble. For the DNA test. My hand tightened around the armrest. You don't waste time. In my experience, waiting rarely improves a situation. He studied me for a moment. Are you opposed to the test? Was I? Part of me wanted to know the truth, whatever it was. Another part was terrified of having my entire identity upended. If the test shows I'm not related to you or Sophia, what happens then? I asked instead of answering directly. Then I offer my sincere apologies for the disruption to your life, provide compensation for your trouble, and ensure you're safely returned to the city. His tone was businesslike, but I detected a note of something like dread at this possibility. And if it's positive? If I am? I couldn't bring myself to say, your daughter. Antonio leaned forward, elbows on his desk. Then we find out exactly what happened 5 years ago. Who took you from Sophia? Who placed you with the rights? Who has been lying to both of us? His voice hardened. And they will pay for it. The cold certainty in his tone sent a shiver down my spine. I'm not sure I want to know. Maybe some things are better left buried. Is that what you truly believe? His gaze was penetrating. That living a life built on lies is preferable to a difficult truth. Put that way, it sounded cowardly. I just mean that finding out might put more people in danger. The Wrights, if they weren't my biological parents, they still raised me, cared for me. Or they were complicit in your abduction. I shook my head vehemently. No. Whatever else might be true, they loved me. I'm certain of that. Antonio's expression softened slightly. Then perhaps they were unwitting participants. But regardless, I intend to discover the full truth. Before I could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. Antonio called for them to enter, and a middle-aged man with silver-rimmed glasses stepped in, carrying a medical bag. Ah, Dr. Moretti. Antonio greeted him, standing. Thank you for coming so quickly, Mr. Russo. The doctor nodded respectfully, then turned to me with a professional smile. And this must be the young lady in question. The test itself was simple enough. A cheek swab from both Antonio and me, sealed in separate containers, labeled and packed away in the doctor's case. How soon will we have results? Antonio asked as he escorted the doctor to the door. I'll have the lab prioritize it. Given the circumstances, we should have preliminary results by tomorrow morning. Full confirmation within 48 hours. After the doctor left, Antonio turned to me. Are you hungry? We could have breakfast in the solarium. The normality of the suggestion seemed absurd given the circumstances, but my stomach rumbled in response. I nodded. The solarium was a beautiful glass-enclosed space overlooking a rose garden, furnished with comfortable wicker chairs and lush plants. A table had been set for two, with fresh fruit, pastries, and a carafe of coffee. As we ate in awkward silence, I gathered my courage to ask the questions that had been burning in my mind since yesterday. Tell me about Sophia, I said finally. What was she like? Something like pain crossed Antonio's features before he masked it. She was unlike anyone I'd ever met. Gentle but strong-willed, educated. She had degrees in art history and literature. She loved poetry, especially the Romantics. A faint smile touched his lips. She used to read Byron to me in the evenings, insisted it was good for my soul. I tried to imagine this hard man sitting quietly while someone read him poetry. The image didn't fit. How did you meet? I asked. At a gallery opening in the city. She was working there as a curator. His expression grew distant with memory. She had no idea who I was, treated me like any other patron. It was refreshing. Did she know? After you got together, I mean. About your work. Antonio's eyes refocused on me. Yes. I never lied to her about who I was or what I did. She chose to accept it, though I know she hoped I might eventually leave that life behind. But you didn't. No, he admitted. Some paths, once taken, are difficult to abandon. You said she had been making plans before she disappeared, that she had secret accounts you didn't know about. His jaw tightened. Yes. For years I thought she might have been planning to leave me. But now, looking back, I think she was creating a contingency plan. A way out if things became too dangerous. For the baby, I murmured. For me, if I am, yes. His voice was certain. Sophia was fiercely protective of those she loved. A thought occurred to me. If she was trying to disappear to protect her child, would she have gone to these lengths, creating a whole new identity, placing the baby with another family? Antonio shook his head. No, that's what doesn't make sense. Sophia would never have willingly given up our child, which means someone took me from her. I finished the thought, a chill running through me. But who? And why? That's what I intend to find out. His hand clenched around his coffee cup. I have people looking into the Wrights, examining birth records from that time period, tracking Sophia's movements in the weeks before her disappearance. The methodical way he approached this, like a criminal investigation, reminded me sharply of who he was, what he was capable of. These people who are helping you, I said carefully. They're what? Hired investigators? Or are they your employees? A cold smile touched his lips. In my world, the distinction is somewhat blurred. But yes, they work for me. Loyalty is highly valued in my organization. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. And Volkov? The man who sent someone to my apartment? What does he want with me? Antonio's expression darkened. Dmitry Volkov and I have a complicated history. We were once partners, years ago, before I established my own territory. The dissolution of that partnership was less than amicable. You mean you betrayed him? Or he betrayed you? Business is business, he replied evasively. What matters is that Volkov has always looked for ways to undermine me. If he's learned of your existence, of your potential connection to me, he'd see it as an opportunity. An opportunity to what? Kill me? Kidnap me? My voice rose with fear and frustration. I didn't ask to be part of this world. No, you didn't, Antonio agreed, his tone softening slightly, and I'm sorry for that. But if you are Sophia's daughter, my daughter, then you were born into this world whether you chose it or not. The weight of his words settled over me like a physical burden. If he was right, if I was his child, then everything, my identity, my past, my future, was irrevocably changed. What happens after the test results? I asked, needing to focus on practicalities. Assuming they're positive, do I just become part of your family, your organization? Start calling you Dad? The last word came out more harshly than I'd intended. Something flashed in his eyes, pain, longing, I couldn't tell. I don't expect anything from you, Eleanor, except your safety. What happens beyond that would be your choice. Would it? Really? I challenged. You've already made it clear that Volkov will come after me again, that I can't go back to my old life. Not immediately, no. But with time, with the right precautions, he trailed off, then sighed. I won't lie to you. If you are my daughter, your life has changed permanently, but that doesn't mean you have no choices within those new parameters. Before I could respond, the door to the solarium opened and one of Antonio's guards entered. He crossed to Antonio and murmured something in his ear. Antonio's expression hardened instantly. Are you certain? He asked sharply, and the man nodded. Antonio turned to me. I need to handle something. Maria will show you around the grounds if you'd like some fresh air, but please don't leave the property. It isn't safe. He stood, already pulling out his phone. I'll find you later. After he left, Maria appeared almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting nearby. Would you like to see the gardens, Miss Eleanor? The roses are particularly beautiful this time of year. The estate grounds were stunning, acres of manicured lawns, formal gardens, and what looked like a small orchard in the distance. But I couldn't appreciate their beauty, not with the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. Maria sensed my distraction and mostly left me to my thoughts as we walked, only occasionally pointing out a particular plant or feature. Security men patrolled discreetly along the perimeter, their presence a constant reminder of my situation. Not quite a prisoner, but certainly not free. Maria, I said as we paused by a fountain, how long have you worked for Antonio? Almost 20 years now, she replied. Since he first bought this property. And you knew Sophia well? A shadow crossed her face. Yes. She was a wonderful woman, very kind to everyone, regardless of their position. Do you think... I hesitated, unsure how to phrase my question. Do you believe I could be her daughter? Maria studied me for a long moment. It's not my place to speculate, Miss Eleanor. Please, I pressed. I need to know what you think. The older woman sighed. When I first saw you, it was like seeing a ghost. You have her eyes, her way of tilting your head when you're thinking. She reached out tentatively, then pulled back. But more than that, there's something about your spirit that reminds me of her. A gentleness, but also a strength underneath. Her words touched something deep within me, a longing to know this woman who might have been my mother. What happened to her, Maria? Really? Pain filled the housekeeper's eyes. There was an accident. Mr. Russo was devastated. For months afterward, he barely ate, barely slept. He searched everywhere for her or for... She trailed off. For me. I finished softly. Maria nodded. He never gave up hope, not completely. Sometimes I would find him in the nursery, the room he had prepared for the baby, just sitting there in the dark. The image of Antonio, hard, dangerous Antonio, sitting alone in a darkened nursery made my throat tight with unexpected emotion. If I am his daughter, I said carefully, what kind of father would he be? He's not exactly a normal man, is he? A small, sad smile crossed Maria's face. Mr. Russo is complicated, yes. But I have never seen him love anyone the way he loved Sophia, and if you are their child, she shook her head slightly, he would burn the world down to protect you, Miss Eleanor. Of that, I am certain. The conviction in her voice was both comforting and terrifying. Protection, yes, but at what cost? And to whom? We continued our walk, eventually circling back toward the house. As we approached, I noticed increased activity, men coming and going, a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. Maria frowned. Something has happened. Perhaps we should go inside. In the grand foyer, Antonio was giving instructions to several men, his voice low and urgent. He looked up as we entered, his expression grim. Maria, please take Eleanor to her suite, he said. Make sure she stays there until I come for her. What's going on? I asked, anxiety spiking. Antonio hesitated, then gestured for me to follow him a few steps away from the others. Volkov's men have been spotted in the area, he said quietly. It could be nothing, but I'm not taking chances. Stay in your suite. There are guards posted throughout the property. How did they find this place? I whispered, fear clawing at my throat. That's what I intend to find out. His expression was cold, dangerous. Someone has been feeding them information. When I discover who... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. As Maria led me upstairs, I glanced back to see Antonio issuing more orders, his men moving with practiced efficiency. This wasn't the refined businessman from breakfast. This was someone else entirely, someone accustomed to command, to violence, to war. If I was his daughter, what did that make me? The hours crawled by as I remained confined to my suite. Maria brought lunch, then dinner, but I barely touched either. My mind raced with too many questions, too many fears. I paced the room like a caged animal, jumping at every sound from the hallway. Night fell, casting the room in shadows. I stood by the window, watching security lights illuminate the grounds, men with weapons patrolling in regular patterns. The mansion had transformed into a fortress, and I was at its center. A soft knock at the door made me turn. Come in. Antonio entered, looking exhausted. His suit jacket was gone, shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms and a glimpse of a tattoo I hadn't noticed before. He closed the door behind him. Are you all right? He asked, eyes scanning me as if checking for injuries. Fine. I gestured vaguely, overwhelmed. He nodded, running a hand through his hair. The security situation is under control. Volkov's men were scouting, nothing more. They've withdrawn for now. For now, I repeated. This is never really going to end, is it? Antonio moved further into the room, keeping a respectful distance between us. There are ways to end it permanently. The implication in his tone sent a chill down my spine. You mean killing Volkov? Among other solutions, he agreed, matter-of-factly, but that's not something you need to concern yourself with. It concerns me if people are trying to kidnap or kill me because of it. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Fair point. He hesitated, then said, The doctor called. Preliminary results from the DNA test will be ready in the morning. My heart skipped a beat. So soon? I have certain arrangements with the lab. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. By tomorrow, we'll know with 99.9% certainty whether you are my daughter. The word hung in the air between us. Daughter. Such a simple word for such a monumental concept. What if I am? I asked softly. What happens then? Antonio moved to the window, looking out at the night. His profile was sharp against the darkness. Then everything changes. You would have your rightful place in my family, my protection, access to resources you've never imagined. And if I don't want that life, he turned to face me, expression unreadable. What life would you want instead? It was a fair question, one I hadn't fully considered. My apartment was compromised. My job at the cafe seemed laughably insignificant now. Could I ever return to that anonymous existence, knowing what I knew? I don't know, I admitted. But I'd want a choice. Of course. He seemed almost hurt that I'd think otherwise. I would never force you into a role you didn't want, but your safety would be non-negotiable. Meaning what, exactly? Security personnel, a new identity perhaps, financial support. He listed these life-altering changes as casually as someone might discuss a grocery list, at minimum. I sank into an armchair, suddenly exhausted. This is all so surreal. Antonio hesitated, then sat in the chair opposite me. I know this is overwhelming. For what it's worth, I never expected this either. After Sophia died, after I thought she died, I resigned myself to being alone. There was raw pain in his voice, so at odds with his controlled exterior that it caught me off guard. For the first time, I saw him not as a threat or a mystery, but as a man who had lost everything he loved. Tell me more about her, I said quietly. About Sophia. His eyes met mine, surprised by the request. Then his expression softened. She loved music. Classical mostly, but she had a weakness for 80s power ballads that she thought I didn't know about. A faint smile touched his lips. She was stubborn, refused to let my security drive her around for the first year we were together. Said she valued her independence too much. Sounds like we have that in common, I murmured. His smile widened slightly. Perhaps. She was also brilliant, spoke 4 languages, could discuss art history or politics with equal passion. He paused, his gaze turning inward with memory. She wasn't impressed by wealth or power. The first time I sent her flowers, an extravagant arrangement, she donated them to a nursing home, told me if I wanted to impress her, I should try conversation instead. I could picture this woman now, independent, intelligent, compassionate. Not the type you'd expect to find with someone like Antonio. How did she reconcile herself to your business? His expression clouded, with difficulty. She knew who I was when we met, but I think she always hoped I would change, become legitimate. He shook his head slightly. When she became pregnant, the conflicts between us grew more pronounced. She wanted a different life for our child. Away from violence, I said softly. Yes. His voice was barely audible. Perhaps that's why she was making those secret preparations. Not to leave me, but to create a safe haven for you, if it became necessary. A thought struck me. Could she be alive? If the accident was staged, if someone took me from her, could Sophia still be out there somewhere? Pain flashed across Antonio's features. I've considered that possibility. For years I searched. He shook his head. If she were alive, she would have found a way back to me. Or at least, she would have searched for her child. Unless she believed her child had died too, I thought but didn't say. The possibility was too painful to voice. A heavy silence fell between us. Through the window, I could see clouds passing across the moon, casting shifting shadows on the grounds below. Tomorrow, Antonio finally said, standing. Tomorrow we'll have answers, or at least, the beginning of them. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't read. Regardless of what the test shows, I will ensure your safety. You have my word on that. After he left, I sat motionless for a long time, watching the moonlight and shadows play across the floor. So much had changed in such a short time. The person I'd been just days ago, Eleanor Wright, waitress, orphan, unremarkable, felt like a stranger now. But who was I instead? Sophia's daughter? Antonio's heir? Or someone else entirely? Someone I hadn't yet discovered. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake, mind churning with possibilities, with fears, with hope. When dawn finally broke, I was already dressed and waiting, perched on the edge of a chair, watching the phone that sat silent on the bedside table. The knock, when it came, startled me despite my anticipation. Antonio entered without waiting for a response, his face grave, a folder in his hand. The results? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded once, crossing the room to stand before me. Would you like to see for yourself? I stared at the folder he extended toward me, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for it. Such a small thing to contain such life-altering information. Opening it, I scanned the medical terminology, the charts and percentages, until my eyes found the conclusion at the bottom of the page. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%. The room seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the arms of the chair, trying to steady myself. "It's true," I whispered. "You are my father." Antonio's expression remained carefully controlled, but his eyes betrayed him. Relief, vindication, and something that might have been joy flashed there before he composed himself. "Yes," he said simply. A strange sensation washed over me. Not quite relief, not quite dread, but something in between. The confirmation of what we'd suspected didn't bring the closure I'd hoped for. Instead, it opened a door to more questions. "If you're my father and Sophia was my mother, then who were the Wrights?" I asked, voice steadier than I felt. "Who raised me for 25 years and why?" Antonio sat in the chair opposite me. "I've had people looking into that. Thomas and Grace Wright were a real couple. Childless. He was indeed an astronomy professor at Northwestern. They both died when you believed they did. So my memories of them are real? Yes, but incomplete. They adopted you when you were approximately 3 years old, not as an infant as would be expected." The revelation hit me hard. 3? But that would mean that you lived somewhere else first, with someone else. His jaw tightened, possibly with Sophia, for a time after the staged accident. "Then what happened to her?" My voice cracked. "If she survived the accident, kept me for 3 years, why would she give me up?" Pain flashed across Antonio's features. "I don't know. But I intend to find out." I stood abruptly, needing to move. "This is too much. All of it." Antonio remained seated, watching me pace. "I understand this is overwhelming, but now that we know the truth about our connection, we can face whatever comes next together." I stopped, turning to face him. "But what does that mean? Am I supposed to just become part of your world now? Learn the family business?" The bitter edge in my voice wasn't entirely intentional. "What it means," he said carefully, "is that you have a father who will protect you at all costs. Beyond that, we have time to figure out the rest." A knock at the door interrupted us. One of Antonio's men entered, expression tense. "Sir, we have a situation." Antonio was on his feet instantly. "What is it?" "A car approaching the gate. Single occupant, female. She's asking for Miss Wright by name." My heart seemed to stop. "Who is it?" The guard looked uncomfortable. "She says her name is Sophia Russo."